Sit back, relax, and join William and Lee on their journey through the strange and mysterious world.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 27 of Strange and Mysterious World. Tonight's guest, we're going to be actually letting Will introduce tonight's guest. Go for it, Will.
Okay, so today we've got Father Damon Abani. He's a priest at the Catholic Liberal Church, which sounds a bit like an oxymoron, but it's really cool. I mean, I wish this church was actually in Cape Town because I'd actually go to it. I mean, I spent a bit of time with him, interviewing him for a few of my documentaries on like mystery schools and occult things and Jesus and whatever. And he's just the most fascinating person to talk to about anything, about religion, about history. I mean, he knows religion through every single religion you can think about. I mean, I was doing a documentary on the end of the world, and we interviewed Bibu Desmera about his book about the Yuga shifts, and I went to India to go film the documentary and that, and I come back home and I find that I can interview Father Damon because he knows all about Yuga shifts and Hindu philosophy, and he's a world of wisdom, a fascinating guy.
So you're saying you wasted 30,000 rand going across India?
Yeah, he's more than 30,000 rand. It was like 100,000 rand. No, but I mean, it was great to go to India and obviously to film Bibu and that, and also Kiara. But no, he's going to be in the documentary, so it's not like it was a waste. They're all going to be in the documentary, and so is Damon. And so he's awesome to listen to. I mean, he's actually made me so excited about the religious stuff, just speaking to him, because he's just such a world of knowledge. I wish that this liberal Catholic church was in Cape Town, because I would definitely go every Sunday. But and also what's interesting is that they're actually very closely related to the Theosophic Society, and a lot of the time the Theosophic Society would actually share the church with the liberal Catholic whatever you want to call him. But here he is. Let's let him in. No, good to see you, Dan. I've just given a great introduction. I can't wait for you to hear it. I hope it exceeds your expectations. And so, but anyway, it's great to have you. I was just telling Lee what a great like how amazing you are with you know about all religions, you know about all history. You're an extremely interesting person to speak to, and I just wish that this liberal Catholic church was here in Cape Town, because I would go to it definitely.
Yeah, well, I would reply to that by saying that I actually know nothing, that all of us know very little about our reality. So a little humility before we start.
So tell me.
I mean, the more we know, the more we don't know. If you realize you don't know, so that's so when people think they're so arrogant, like they know everything, I'm just like, oh my gosh, you actually don't know anything. Like the scientists, I get so irritated with science. Like it's like when I meet a scientist, I'm like, oh, you figured it all out. So we know everything, huh? Like, cause that's what because you actually don't know anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So a perfect example would be the recent Webb telescope. They say the Big Bang Theory was 13.7 billion years ago, and then they train the Webb telescope, and we see a galaxy fully formed at 26 billion years ago. So now they have to go back to the drawing boards. So that is also a teaspoon of humility.
So did they cancel that? The telescope? So they were like, no, this telescope.
No, they actually, at the moment, what they're doing is they're trying to come up with explanations, because obviously there's not supposed to be anything before the Big Bang, which they claim is 13.7 billion years ago. But hang on a second, the telescope that the Webb telescope sees, the galaxy that the Webb telescope sees, is 26 billion years old. So now they can't explain that. So I've seen a few explanations where they're saying, well, that's not a galaxy, it must be something else.
Yeah, exactly. And also the Big Bang is so funny because I told you about all the trouble I got into with my daughter's mother with the blind, like the trying to make her see through a blindfold, all of that saga. But anyway, so now my ex is, I don't know, it's the funniest thing. I took my daughter swimming the other day. We're just busy swimming in the swimming pool, and my daughter turns around to me and she goes, I don't believe in Jesus. She's 5 years old. She turns to me and she goes, I don't believe in Jesus. I believe in the Big Bang. I'm thinking, like, her mother must have been so upset with me. Now she's drilling this into her daughter, the Big Bang. And I just looked at her and I said, well, who made the Big Bang? And obviously, and then I'm worried. Oh my God, her mother's going to phone me, and it's going to be this huge. Oh, take me to court for, I don't know, something. But sorry, I digress. What were you talking about? You had a question.
I can't remember my question. Oh yes. So William introduced the Catholic Church, your Catholic Church specifically, as something different than the normal Catholic Church. So you said it was the Catholic what?
The liberal Catholic Church.
So what is a liberal Catholic Church? What's that?
Well, in order to understand that, we have to go back to just after the Jansenite Rebellion, which was what happened in the church just after the Lutheran movement split the Roman Church, almost 450 years or so ago. What happened was a number of the Roman Catholics in the world said, you know what, we're not joining Luther, but we admit and agree with some of the things that Luther said. The church is corrupt, there's problems in the church, and we need to sort them out. And it caused a lot of trouble. And one of the regions, which was very independent, even though it was in the Roman Catholic Church, was the Archbishopric of Utrecht in the Netherlands. And they were part of that whole Jansenite rebellion, and they maintained a separate apostolic succession, which is valid. And then what happened a little bit later, in the 1880s, we had what was called the First Vatican Council. And the First Vatican Council came to the conclusion that the Pope is infallible when speaking ex cathedra. When speaking from his throne, he's infallible. And a number of people said, well, that can't be the case. Obviously, we've had some really bad popes, etc., that were certainly not infallible, even when speaking ex cathedra. And they broke away and they formed what was known as the Old Catholic Church. Started off first in Holland, but in other countries in Europe. And our apostolic succession descends from the Old Catholic Church in Holland, where we had a number of people that belonged to that church, but broke away and founded their own church in London in 1916. Now, they were already consecrated bishops, which means they had the right to then consecrate other people as bishops. The apostolic succession is valid and unbroken. So we are Catholic, absolutely, but we are not in communion with the See of Rome, like a number of Catholic churches. People seem to forget that there's a lot of Catholic churches. There's the Oriental Orthodox Church, there's the Eastern Orthodox Church, consisting of many, many different Catholics. Remember, the word Catholic comes from the Greek word katholikos, which means universal. So they're all Catholic, as it were. And then, of course, you have the Anglican Communion, the Anglican Church, which broke away under Henry VIII. They maintained their apostolic succession as well. So you've got a lot of little Catholic churches. Some of them are in communion with the See of Rome, with the Roman Catholic Church under the Pope. We are not. We broke away a while ago, and we formed our own church in London in 1916. And that church was called the Liberal Catholic Church. Now, I just need to clarify two things. First of all, everything that I'm saying is my own opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf formally of the Liberal Catholic Church. I don't have permission to do that. I am a priest in the Liberal Catholic Church. Also, the word liberal had very different meanings in 1916 than what it does today. Liberal back then just meant open-minded, open to certain other understandings, interpretations, and that word has changed a lot now. When we think of liberals, some dreadful images come into our minds. We certainly are not liberal in the modern sense of the word, but we are.
So not the woke Catholic Church.
We are mystical. We are definitely not the woke Catholic Church. We are actually rather conservative, but we do differ. We have the unbroken apostolic succession, so our ordinations and consecrations are valid. And we are certainly absolutely Catholic. We have the 7 sacraments of the original and traditional Catholic Church, handed down by Christ to his apostles and unbroken. But we have different interpretations. We are more mystical. So we tend to look deeper. And we also don't impose standard dogmas on our people. So if you come to our church and you show reverence for the sacrament. We will include you in the sacrament. We will give you the sacrament, and you will have access to all 7 of those sacraments. And the service will be very Catholic, beautifully ritual in the old form, not the modern post 1962 Novus order. We do the Mass in the old form of the Mass. With the incense and all the beautiful ritual, because there's power in rituals. So we utilize that. And so we are different. We are certainly Catholic. We're not Roman Catholic, but we are Catholic, independent, as it were. And we are mystical, which means that we're open to certain ideas and interpretations that other Christians might not be. So that is who we are. And you've been to our church, William,
very,
and
very
you've
beautiful.
seen it, and you see that we are valid and that we are functioning as such.
Yeah, no, it's a really beautiful church. And also, that just brought me back to a memory, because my best friend, he's actually a Catholic, and I remember his parents wanted me to go to church with them. I think I was like 9 years old or whatever, and I came into the Catholic church there. This is in Mafeking, and I mean, it was quite, as a youngster, I haven't really been on such a amazing church. And I was a bit overwhelmed, and I'm looking, and we had to all stand in line, and then like everyone had to do this, like it wasn't the cross, it was like another funny hand movement, and then the feet of man, I'm standing there and I'm like panicking because I was just and before we went there, they were trying to teach me this thing to do, but I couldn't remember it. And I'm saying I'm still watching everybody doing this thing to try and do it right. And I get to the front there and I just like make up something. I don't know what symbol what a cultist symbol, or maybe like opened a portal or something. And then I kissed the feet, and then I went, and then I went to go sit down, and then they actually came and they gave me the money basket at the end to take to the. And they were pointing. They said, "You got to go to that pew there, whatever." So I just went and I just followed the other guy with the basket, and then I just stood behind him. So he gave the pew the basket, and then I just gave the same pew the basket. So I was just like, so the people on that pew, that section of the church had to pay double, because like my basket was right after his. But I still got money, so. But then they never asked me to come back to church. That family, they never went back to the. I think I embarrassed them. So anyway.
Okay, so there's a question I have. So you are mentioning earlier that you are Catholic, which is universal. So you don't follow the Pope, the Pontiff currently.
No, we don't.
He's got zero to do with you. Okay.
No, absolutely not. We're not in communion with Rome, but our apostolic succession and our sacraments are valid. So we have a presiding archbishop who lives in Ojai in California, and he comes out every now and again. And we have churches. We've got 2 parishes in South Africa. We used to have more. William, you mentioned that you wish that there was a church in Cape Town. There actually was one at one time. In the building of the Theosophical Society, we did actually have a church there. We also had churches in Durban and other places throughout the country. But unfortunately, those closed down when the priests passed away. So we have one here in Johannesburg, a very old one. It was consecrated in 1922, but an altar had been standing there at least from about 1918. So it's a very old church. In fact, we've been going for a very long time. We have another church in Pretoria called St. Francis in the Wood, dedicated to St. Francis. Our church here in Johannesburg is dedicated to St. Alban the Martyr. And so we've been around for a long time. As you can see, we don't wear black. Black is the absence of light, so we wear this violet color, which is of a higher vibration. So we are mystical. We're very mystical, and we look deep. We go deeply into the things. So it's not for everyone, but it is for people that are searching and that are looking deeper. It has a certain esoteric quality to it, which means that it would be of interest only to select people. We don't exclude anyone. We have a very, very well-functioning Sunday school from the local community coming in. And so we do good service. And our whole purpose, of course, is to deliver the 7 sacraments as a means of uplifting the consciousness, raising the consciousness, moving towards self-realization, understanding ourselves so that we have a better understanding of reality. And that's who we are. And we function every Sunday. We have a mass every Sunday, and very often we have lectures and talks thereafter as well. So it's a thriving community, not as big as some churches are, but also not paltry.
But when you say esoteric, sorry, man. When you say esoteric, can you just give it like an example of what you mean by that? You guys are more esoterics, because
for example, we're open to certain ideas and understandings that might be considered theosophical to interpretations. For example, myself, I believe in reincarnation of the soul, and we believe that that was an original teaching. When Christ said, "He who lives by the sword shall die by the sword, and he who leads into bondage shall himself be led into bondage." And then obviously also in the Bible, where he's talking about John the Baptist. And he says, "For those of you that can accept it, this man," meaning John the Baptist, "was Elias returned." So it's an understanding that in the early church, the idea of reincarnation was not alien. It was understood in the Platonic sense of the word, reincarnation of the soul, the idea of cause and effect. And we believe that is taught in the New Testament. So we are open to certain ideas. We never impose them. So anyone can come to our church, join in the service. They don't have to accept our beliefs. People can believe and take it as they wish, how they want to. But we do require that they show reverence, due reverence, because like all Catholics, we believe that the bread and the wine, we believe in transubstantiation, so that the subtle bodies of the bread and the wine are transformed and linked to Christ himself. So we do believe in that. And so we require reverence when entering into our church because we believe in the transubstantiation.
Okay. And now I wanted to ask a question with regards to the seven sacraments.
Yes.
Now, obviously, maybe this is just something that came to mind. And obviously, with you wearing violet, is there some sort of connection with the energy bodies in the human being, the seven chakras, as well as
yes.
the physical? Well, not the physical, but the physical body, the emotional body, the causal body, with your aura,
Absolutely.
your aura colors.
Yes.
So that kind of
Absolutely.
sounds something. Okay.
Absolutely. So that is part of the teaching. We occupy at least 7 dimensions at the same time. And what you call the chakras, which is the Sanskrit word, we would probably call them vortices in English, are the connection points. So what you actually see and perceive with your 5 senses is obviously the physical body. That's the outermost rim of what extends rather deeply and more subtle than the physical is the emotional, which is a separate body linked to it, but separate, and more subtle than the emotional is the mental. And the mental body is divided into 2, the lower mental and the higher mental. And the higher mental, of course, is the abstract. And then you have your intuitive bodies, your causal bodies. Those are of the soul, going up right until you reach the one, the point of union of all things, which is God the Father, which is spirit. So our understanding is that we exist on multidimensional beings, and we are made in God's image, not because we have a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs. We are in God's image because we have spirit, God the Father. We have a soul, God the Son, and we have life, God the Holy Spirit. So we are manifestations of the blessed and ever Holy Trinity, existing on all these various dimensions at one time. And our job is to become aware and to become active on those deeper levels of existence. So not just on the physical, the emotional, and the mental, where most people function, but also higher than that on the abstract, on the intuitional, and then you can go into all the various other things that the Theosophists will teach you about, causal bodies, etc. And they'll come up with a large number of Sanskrit terminology, which is for more advanced students. But suffice it to say that at the one level, we are all linked. We are one. Obviously, we know that is God. That's why there's such a thing as love, because ultimately that points to the union of being. We are one. So we are spirit, we have a soul, and which is the individualization of spirit. And then we have life, and we have come down into temporary incarnation, into lower vehicles, into more coarse material. And we need to wake up within this material, raise our consciousness and become more aware. Raise ourselves from the purely animal nature of the physical, emotional, and lower mental, and into that of the soul. And, we have a way of explaining that. People will say, okay, but there's no evidence of these things, but we maintain that there is evidence of the soul, and that comes from the conscience, the consciousness, the conscience. So your conscience, the voice of your conscience, is evidence of the soul. That voice that tells you, don't do that, or you shouldn't have done that, is actually the real you, the immortal, eternal you. That is the soul. Whereas the lower personality tries to block it out, etc., all the time, concerned with the things of everyday life, bound as it is in space and time, which the soul is not. And so we can point to the soul and say, well, here is evidence of the soul, or the conscience is evidence of the soul. And of course, if there's soul, there's spirit, and if there's spirit, there's certainly God. So when people want evidence of these things, that is there. You've all felt that pang, and I hope that everyone has felt that pang of the conscience, because that is actually the voice of the soul. So we believe that we've got sound theory, that we based on sound principles, and we are ever searching, of course, and wanting to reunite with those higher principles.
So now
it's funny when people. Sorry, go for it, Lee.
No, so the light body, the one that sits like kind of on the outmost of the auric field. A lot of people associate the light body with the creator God, and this is the communicator that kind of, it's almost like your conduit to receive the messages or to receive whatever it is that's coming from the cosmos or from the universe. That's through this body, through the light body.
Right. So the problem with that, though, unfortunately, is that most people aren't really conscious on that level.
Mm.
We've come down into very, very gross matter. The physical world is very gross material, and the emotional world not much better than that, etc. So not many people, and our everyday lives function within the physical, emotional, and lower mental. Mm. And what I mean by the lower mental is that mindset where you get in your car and you drive to work, and then you get to work and you can't remember how you got there. It was all muscle movement and basic things. The abstract or the higher mental is where you go into abstract art and that association. So the problem is, and you can go into that is more of a theosophical discussion, and they will show you dimensions and charts and diagrams and things like that, which are all relevant, but it is for a deeper student. Suffice it to say, for most people at this point, is that you're a spirit, you have a soul, and you have life. And life is not only in the lower dimensions, physical, emotional, and lower mental. There is higher life in that as well. And the vast majority of people are stuck, as it were, in this lower, restricted and limited space, limited by space and time, limited by the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy, which things fall apart. So matter is not the ideal substance to express the soul in. It falls apart, it degrades very quickly, and this is very limiting to us. And so most people are bound by trying to struggle with everyday life, and very few people actually raise their consciousness up. Now, something like the Mass, which is ultimately a group guided meditation, coming together, raising up the consciousness, there is the ultimate point of the consecration, and then everything that was raised up comes back down again and makes a blessing, bestows a blessing upon us. So that slowly but surely raises the consciousness in slow, safe ways, and slowly but surely we become more sensitive on the higher realms. We become more aware of reality. Most of reality, of course, is blocked out by our five senses, which is we see, we hear, we smell, we taste, and we feel. And anything beyond that, we don't really experience. But that's not reality. That's not the true reflection of reality. This reality runs very deep, and we know so very little about it. As we were saying at the beginning of this podcast, we know so little about what is around us. Who are we? What are we? Where are we? When are we? So our duty is to deliver the gospel of Christ, who certainly knew this. We believe that Christ was a manifestation of the Logos in this lower realm, the Logos meaning the Word, in other words, the super soul, the original soul, that was the message that he brought into the world, and he delivered 7 sacraments to us by which we are able to actually utilize these 7 sacraments to uplift ourselves. So we are definitely Christian. We are Christians. We believe in Jesus Christ, Yeshua Mashiach, whatever you want to call him. We believe in him. We believe in his gospel. We might just have a slightly shifted perspective of its depth than what most other churches have. But we are definitely Christian, and we definitely believe in him. And we believe in his message. And I think that many people have been confounded by the way the gospel has been preached and the way the gospel has been transferred, not fully understanding what the real message of the gospel is. And the message of the gospel is you are more than what you think you are. You are very powerful things. You are manifestations of the triune God himself. Shake off your dust, shake off your sleep, wake up and remember, as it says in the book of Revelations, remember from whence thou art fallen and do the former things. So it's an awakening that we're trying to deliver, and that we believe is what Jesus Christ's message was as well. Salvation through sacrifice, through becoming self-aware, and self-realization, of course, would require sacrifice. The sacrifice of the lower nature and its attachments in order to exert energy and put energy and focus onto the higher aspects of ourselves, a higher nature. And so that's what we try to accomplish.
Well, I think
within the framework of the Catholic tradition.
So I was going to say, I think, kind of going on to what you were saying there regarding Jesus kind of explaining to especially his disciples about the mystical part of the human being. When he was walking on the water as an example, and that's just like the silliest example, but when he was walking on the water and he approached the boat, I think it was Peter, I stand to be corrected, but I think it was Peter that he spoke to him and said, come with me. And Peter actually started walking on the water, but then he got a bit frightened and lost, and then he kind of sank into the water. But you're right, everything he said, and I mean, he says it many times through his journey on earth. And he says, everything that I do, you can do and more. So it's
precisely.
Yeah.
And also you need to also look at it from maybe not always a literal point of view. So there's the literal interpretation of the Gospels, and then there's the deeper one. It's like an onion. On the surface, you have a certain reality, and you peel off a layer, and you peel off a layer. And Christ was certainly teaching on different levels at once. He told his disciples, to you I give special teachings, but to these people, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't know the exact quotation, I teach in parables. And his parables are extremely profound. The parable of the prodigal son is probably the most profound because it speaks about our source in the spirit world, leaving that spiritual world, falling down into devolution, waking up down at the lowest level, and then figuring out that we need to return and returning, and then the father comes out to greet his prodigal son. Within that one parable is basically the answer to all our questions: where we come from, who we are, where we are, and what we need to do. With regard to the story that you've just mentioned about him walking on the water, in esoteric interpretations, water represents the emotions. And the emotions are things that can really misguide us, blown about like a storm. The water is blown about like a storm. The emotions direct us in all different places. We're bound by the physical. We have poor impulse control on the emotional level and on the mental level. So one could also interpret that story as being one has to raise oneself above the emotional level to get clarity. And when one is able to do that, you can see more clearly and you can do more. Now, if you think about it, and this is just one example, you could go on all night with the examples. This is just one example, is for how many times you get into trouble in your life because of poor impulse control, poor physical control, running around knee-jerk reactions. You get yourself into trouble because you're blown about like a leaf or in a storm or on stormy water. So perhaps that's something he was also alluding to. So I'm not saying that it didn't actually happen. Take it literally. I'm pretty sure that he was able to do all of those things, but there's a deeper interpretation. Let's look at something else if we can. Let's look at the figure of the crucifixion, a cross with Jesus Christ hanging on the cross. So the first time we see a crucifix, and it's a profound image if you think about it. This man is crucified, nailed to a cross. And you think, oh, well, that was Jesus 2,000 years ago, our Lord sacrificing himself. But when you look at it deeper, you should actually start perceiving yourself. Hang on a second. I'm a spirit, I have a soul, and I'm bound in space and time and in matter, in the material world. And that is almost like being crucified. I can't move. I'm so limited. I can't express myself because I am bound in space and time and in matter. So there's a deeper meaning. The initial one, you see Jesus Christ sacrificing himself, salvation through sacrifice. Take up your cross and follow me. He never promised you riches, never promised you a good time on earth. Okay. Despite what some pastors and that preach, Jesus never mentioned that. He said, you got to follow me. You got to take up your cross and follow me. And you can only make spiritual progress by sacrificing the lower nature. And that's what he did. But then when you look deeper, you'll never look at a crucifix the same again. All of a sudden, you look at a crucifix and you say, my goodness, that's me. My soul is bound and crucified in matter and in space and time. So all of these Gospels, all of these narratives that we get, the epistles, the Gospels, the whole Bible story, and of course we're going into Advent now, the whole story of the Nativity, these narratives are pregnant with deeper meaning. And Christ seems to point us in that direction himself. But he continuously says, let he who has an ears to hear, let him hear. Not so. That happens quite often, isn't it, when he's teaching his disciples. Very profound stuff. Did they actually understand his message?
No.
I think it's a very good question. Some of them might have. I think St. John the Beloved certainly seems to have. The others might not have fully understood exactly what he's talking about. But something profound happened there. The vast majority of those apostles ended up being martyred in the most dreadful ways. John the Beloved himself did not. So they gave their lives for something. So something profound absolutely happened 2,000 years ago. And this, I think, is what the story is. We're going into the narrative now of the Nativity. And the whole Nativity scene is, you see the story that they travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Bethlehem means the house of bread in Hebrew. And they can't find a place in the inn. Where do they find themselves? In a stable, the most humble place. They find themselves in a stable. And they're sitting there, and the baby Jesus is given birth to, and they lay him in a manger. A manger is a box where the animals eat from, the straw. And you see this whole thing with the baby Jesus, just newborn in the manger, and around about are animals. There's usually sheep and goats and cows, and then there's Joseph standing on one side, Mary on the other, and above all is the star that guides the Magi, the wise men, to Bethlehem where he's born. Now, you can see that as a literal interpretation. You can read it mystically and say, okay, so this awakening, this birth that happens in a humble place. The humble place is the earth. It's one of the humblest of all realms, is the earth, the hard, gross material of the earth. The animals represent the animal nature within us. We eat, drink, mate, defend, and sleep, just like all animals do, don't we? So we have that animal nature within us. Then you have Joseph, the pious, hardworking man. He represents the candidate for initiation, the worthy candidate that has raised himself up above his animal nature. The animal nature is still there, but he's slightly above that, representing the ideal candidate. On the other side is Lady Mary, representing the soul. And out of this, when these things are ready, the star above the stable is spirit. When the personality, the mind, the soul, and the spirit are well aligned, something is born. Something comes in. This realization of divinity is born, but it is very, very subtle. It is very fragile. It is a small, helpless little baby is born. This realization of the divine within us. And immediately what Herod does, immediately after the wise men visit, and they bring very important gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, a threefold gift. The gold representing kingly power, the frankincense representing priestly power, and the myrrh representing prophetical power. The myrrh is something that they embalmed people with. So he knew that he prophesies his own sacrifice. This is a threefold thing, a thrice majestic aspect. And you see the Pope in Rome, when they did still crown the popes, he wore a triple diadem with 3 crowns. And ironically, in the book of Revelations, it says that when Christ returns, on his head were many crowns. They represent this threefold power: kingly power, priestly power, and prophetic power. Immediately after those gifts are given to him, the family has to flee because Herod wants to kill them. So this newborn realization is immediately at threat, at risk, and must flee. And it's such an amazing thing. Where do they flee to? They flee, in the narrative, they flee to Heliopolis in Egypt, the city of Vinicius. So there's different, you understand what I'm trying to say here. There is the literal interpretation. Then there are deeper interpretations, much deeper interpretations. Are we just seeing the surface? Is there more to the narrative than what we realize? Is it only that something happened 2,000 years ago in the Holy Land and that this man came in and taught us? Or is there more to the story? Do we need to raise our consciousness? Do we need to look deeper and see that there is definitely more to this narrative than just a literal interpretation? And you can take it any way you want to. I myself believe that because it's the divine, it can actually present things literally and with figurative and deeper meanings in it as well. I mean, there's the astrological interpretation of Christmas. Okay, the 25th of December. Nowhere does it tell us when Jesus was born historically, but the 25th of December is 3 days after the Northern Hemisphere's winter solstice, where the sun dies, as it were. It goes to its most southerly point, and it's the coldest time. And then it doesn't move on the eclipse. It stays there for 3 days and then starts moving north again. And from there, that's the midpoint of winter, and things start becoming better. So that lines up perfectly with the whole narrative as well. So it has an astrological interpretation as well. And the three wise men, the three stars of Orion's belt, okay, as Robert Bauval showed us, the three stars of Orion's belt, which you follow those down, it's in the eastern sky at that time, will lead you, if you follow Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, is where, points above the area where that new sun will be born. So there are a number of interpretations here. This is not just a story about a holy man or a manifestation of the Lord that happened in the Holy Land 2,000 years ago. This narrative is very well put together and has meaning on many different levels depending on who you are and what your needs are and what your perspective is. So I'm sorry if I went into a long explanation there.
No,
I'm just trying to...
No, that's very interesting.
Damon, let me tell you something. I can see why you guys are not part of the Catholic Church. Or the standard church.
Yeah, it sounds like a heretical right now.
No, but it's actually cool.
No,
I mean, there's
no, I'm just joking, Damon. I don't.
Half the stuff I didn't even think of, like the way you're explaining, and I'm thinking, shit, that actually makes a lot more sense than what, because obviously William and I, we kind of on that enlightened path, and we kind of see things very differently. But that you've explained there makes the Bible sound a lot more feasible to what it currently stands at now. If you're looking at it, if you're looking at it literally, you're thinking, this thing doesn't make sense. It's half the stuff is there. It's like now this is kind of, I think, why most people actually don't even believe anymore, because it just, when you're going through it literally, it just makes it just sounds shit. But when the way you've explained it is,
but it's like the pressure.
Yeah, it's. I've never thought about
my personal opinion on the matter is that Yeshua, Jesus, was part of a sect within Judaism, and Judaism was not the Judaism we have today. There were many different versions of Judaism in those days. There were the Sadducees, there were the Pharisees, there were Essenes, there were a whole lot of different ones. And I think that he belonged to a Gnostic sect within Judaism. And this is my personal opinion. This isn't an official teaching of our church. That was headed by John the Baptist. They were relatives. So John the Baptist was the next in line. And when he baptized Jesus, so Jesus was definitely part of his sect. Now, the interesting thing here is that sect still exists in the world today. After the Romans destroyed the temple in the 70s AD, John the Baptist's remaining disciples went to Iraq, and they started baptizing along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They're known as the Mandaeans. Now, the Mandaeans are the surviving disciples of John the Baptist. They tell a very different story, and by the way, they're very Gnostic. They tell a very different story. They never ever baptized infants. That is a modern story. Their baptism, which is called Suba. So John the Baptist is known amongst them as Yakanan al-Suba, John the Baptist. And they have baptism as a sacrament every Sunday. And then they have their communion is bread and water. So when the Crusaders encountered them during the Middle Ages and the Crusades, they said, oh, these are Christians of St. John. But these Mandaeans said, no, it wasn't Jesus who was the Messiah. It was John the Baptist that was the Messiah. After John the Baptist was executed, then Jesus slotted into the role. So that is just an opinion. That is just another version of the story, and you can check it is actually true. Those people still exist. They suffered very heavily recently under ISIS. ISIS persecuted them dreadfully because they're neither Muslim nor Christian nor anything else. They're like the Yazidis. They're separate, and so there is a continuum from that time to this very day. And so I get the impression sometimes that the religion that was taught by Jesus, the way that was taught by Jesus, the initiation that Jesus taught, is not often reflected in the church that we have today after 2,000 years. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I have my own opinions on that as well. But it still functions. The seven sacraments function. The apostolic succession is still there and works. It's just a matter of slightly shifting the perspective a little, not very much. If you came to our service, you would see a Catholic Mass in the old form of the Mass. You'd see the same veneration, the same ritual, maybe just a slightly shifted perspective, but still absolutely Christian, still strong in faith and still going. So, yeah, and deep, mystical, in fact, with
Damon,
a mystical understanding.
Sorry, I wanted to ask you a question on the kind of the Gospels that are not included in the Bible that we have today. For example, the Gospel of Mary, there's and the Gospel of Bartholomew and all these other guys, and even Judas.
No.
But the whole thing is apparently, according to a lot of the Gnostic Gospels, if that's the word for them, Mary was probably seen as the top follower. She was Jesus. She was the favorite to Jesus, apparently, according to.
Okay, so what we're talking about there, of course, is Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
Jesus' mother, Miriam, was a different person.
Yes. Correct.
One of the ladies that he interacted with very often was Mary of Magdalene, Mary of Magdala. And the story arose that he drove 7 demons out of her, etc. So these Gnostic Gospels were destroyed initially by the early church. And one of the founding fathers, Irenaeus, was extremely vociferous in hunting down and destroying the Gnostics. It was a form of Christianity that kind of was not quite accepted by the 4 synoptic Gospels. Now, they were largely successful. And I think it's unfortunate that they were. I don't really accept all of them. The most profound one for me is the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is extremely profound. It shows a depth that is quite remarkable. It shows a depth of understanding that you don't really see very much of in the other Gospels. Now, remember the history of the church. Originally, Christianity existed in many different forms. The Gnostics, various Gnostic forms of Christianity existed. But then we had a political situation which happened. We had in the Roman Empire 4 contenders to the imperial throne. And Constantine was one of those, but he was one of 4. And he had to actually fight a number of civil wars against his competitors in order to unite both. Remember, in those days, the Roman Empire was divided into the Eastern Empire and the Western Empire. And in each of those empires were 2 different contenders. So he had to conquer all of those different ones and unite the empire. And the story goes, the narrative says that at one of the most important battles, the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, he looked up and he saw the sign in the heavens that was a cross. And he was told that if you bear this cross on your soldiers, and he painted the cross on his soldiers' shields, and they would have victory. Now, we know that Constantine himself was a member of the Mithraic cult. Like most of the Roman army in those days, they had a secret sect within the Roman army called the Mithraic cult. They worshipped Mithras, which was a Christ-like being within Zoroastrianism that had come from Persia. It was the religion of the Magi, the ones that are actually described. So they had this cult. They met on Sundays. They celebrated the 25th of December as one of their major feast days, and they celebrated together, hidden away in a cavern by having a sacred meal together. So there's a lot of correspondences. Now, Constantine had to pull this huge empire together, and he realized immediately, hang on, but none of you bishops, you're all disagreeing. You don't have the same story. You've got the Gnostics, there were so many different sects at that time, and he called the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD in Nicaea, which is in present-day southern Turkey. And all the bishops of the world went to this Council of Nicaea, and they spent 2 years there deliberating with each other, and they deliberated very fiercely, and they almost voted not to include the book of Revelations. Other things were also were also discussed and debated. Our beloved St. Nicholas, who was the Bishop of Myra, had his nose broken in a fisticuff with another bishop. And twice, we are told, the imperial guard had to come to break and separate the bishops. And Constantine says, you're sitting here until you come up with a single formula. Now, remember what Constantine was. Constantine was an emperor, and he was trying to unite he had an imperial agenda. Now, Christ's real teachings, and certainly the Gnostic teachings, are not in line with an imperial agenda. They speak of a kingdom. An empire and a kingdom are very different things. A kingdom is set with a king as a priestly king who represents God. An empire is constantly expanding and has probably economic reasons for its existence. Not so. So Constantine had an imperial agenda, and he had to unite the people, and one of the ways in doing that was to bring this religion in, but this religion had to be so changed, so manipulated that it became conducive to the imperial agenda. And that's possibly what happened. In many ways, the essential parts were retained, the essential teachings were retained. They decided and debated what books should go into the New Testament. They decided on 4 Gospels only, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They excluded all the other Gospels that we have, we only heard the reference to until 1947, where the Nag Hammadi texts were found in Egypt. And then only did we see these Gospels that they referred to. But one can understand why possibly they were thrown out and they weren't accepted. I've read most of them, and I am very in favor of the Gospel of Thomas being extremely profound. The other ones, I'm not 100% sure of, but certainly we should read them and we should study them. The Gospels do seem to have the same narrative according to 4 different perspectives, but perhaps there was a 5th, 6th, or even more perspective, which was unfortunately left out. Unfortunately, we found these documents. They definitely are worthy of study by scholars. I certainly am very favorable to the Gospel of Thomas myself. I think it's wonderful. It's deeply profound. So people think that the church came freshly delivered. There was no such thing. The church came and actually underwent an evolution, devolution, call it what you want. It changed and it adapted. And we've just now celebrated, for example, Halloween. Okay, that was All Hallows evening on last Thursday evening, because the next day, the Friday, is All Saints Day, celebrated by the church, and the Saturday is All Souls Day. And the reason for this, of course, is that these were pagan celebrations. I'm thinking specifically of the Celtic celebration of Samhain. It's spelled Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain. And that was the festival of the dead, when the realm of the living and the dead was very thinly separated. The church, by Paul's own admission, absorbed all of these things and changed them. Think of Easter. The actual word Easter comes from Jostre, the name of the Germanic goddess of the moon. And if you look at the moon, the full moon, what shape is on the moon? A rabbit. So we have an Easter bunny. So the church definitely did absorb all of these pagan beliefs, changed and adapted them, the 25th of December being absolutely one of them. to align up with the astrological solstice, the 3 days after the solstice. Paul said in his, and I'm paraphrasing here, unto the Jews I became as to the Jews. Unto those under the law I became as under the law, and to those that weren't under the law I became as to them, in order to win them. So he admits the process that actually took place. He had a different message for the Hebrews. He had a different message for the different Colossians and the Galatians and all that kind of thing, in order to win them and bring them into the church. Ultimately, the gospel is the same, but the way he went about it and the way the church adapted to accommodate these people was very different. And so we know this historically. The church grew out of this, an accommodation of all these different beliefs and things that were inculcated and were transformed and taken into the church and its beliefs and its traditions. And that's what we have to this very day. We have this religion. We celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December. We celebrate Easter. You know, we even use the terminology, the Easter egg, the new life, the ancient Egyptian symbol of the egg. You know, these things were incorporated into the church's law. And this is how the church grew, and why it was able to grow so fast is because it adapted and incorporated all of these different beliefs. And I mean, just up until very recently in the countryside, pagan means rural, by the way. In the rural areas, people are still celebrating some of these things. You have the Morris dances and the maypole, you know, in tradition. The famous Christmas tree, oh my goodness, where did that come from? That came from the great temple in Sweden, in Uppsala, the great temple to Odin. Yes, that's right. And to Odin in Uppsala in Sweden. And they would do a 9-fold sacrifice every 9 years, which included human sacrifice, and the sacrifices were hung in the tree. So today we've got a Christmas tree with decorations hung in it as a symbol of Christmas. People don't realize the macabre origin of something like the Christmas tree. But it's adapted. And you know what? It's fine. It's fine. It's okay. We can cope with those things. They can help us. I certainly don't want to have a Christmas without beautiful Christmas trees. I don't want to have an Easter without the Easter bunny. I'm aware of the spiritual teachings of that time, but you also have to enjoy yourself. So Halloween, which we've just had, now that's a little bit of a different one, because that can become very macabre indeed. We never used to celebrate it in this country. Remember, we only had Guy Fawkes. That's today. Tonight is supposed to be Guy Fawkes, amongst other things. It's also election day in the United States. How macabre is that? But we had these traditions, and then slowly but surely, of course, it infiltrated us. But that's where it came from. It was All Souls. So we celebrate All Hallows Evening, Halloween. And so people now dress up as ghouls and goblins and things like that, go and make fun of it, which is also not too bad as long as people are aware of what they're dealing with. Reality, as we said, is deep. Some of these archetypes are based on real things. And yeah, I'm talking about vampires, werewolves, zombies, witches, these things. These are all Hollywood fantasies that are based on real things that have happened in history, that have happened on the long history of humanity's evolution. And so one needs to take care, needs to be aware of what you allow into your subconscious. We don't allow children to watch scary movies before they go to sleep because they'll have bad dreams. Well, as an adult, your subconscious can still be polluted by these things. So we have to be very careful, because sometimes it's just fun, and that's okay. We're not anti-fun. But sometimes when you stare into an abyss, it stares back. So there are things that we don't understand, that majority of people don't understand their reality and what is all around us all the time, unperceived for the most part. And so we actually had a talk on this at the church after Mass on Sunday, where we actually looked at this and we discussed it, not wanting to ruin children's fun, but is it really appropriate? Should it go along with an explanation? And so, we have all of these things that we've incorporated. But do we really understand them? And to what extent are our church leaders today initiates? Have we suffered? Have we lost so much of the truth and of the narrative because our clergymen are uninitiated men that don't fully understand? Are we focusing on the wrong things in the formation of priests and ministers? Possibly. It's an opinion. People might have different opinions. But we're losing a lot of believers and we're losing a lot of relevance because we're so shallow. I've been to 2 funerals lately, a Methodist one and an Anglican. In both cases, the minister and the priest completely failed to uplift and to help the people to understand the process of death. They simply did not have the knowledge. And so what happens very often is you have these very long sermons with no content. They just babble on because they've got to say something. They're not explaining about the immortality of the soul. They're not giving comfort to the bereaved, understanding that actually there's no such thing. The person has cast off their physical body, will eventually cast off their emotional body and mental body, but the soul endures forever. No one dies. So there's no comfort to be had in it because they don't know. They don't know these things. They're not initiates. So if we present ourselves as candidates for initiation, if we present ourselves as worthy, committed candidates, then the heavens will interact with us and will guide us on. But the vast majority of people are nowhere near this, unfortunately. And so we have a situation where religion degrades and degenerates. And, we've just had the example now again of the synod on synodality in Rome and all the bizarre things that they're suggesting and reforms that they're suggesting, which really don't help anything. So unfortunately, we are in an age of degradation where our Western civilization is being threatened by certain belief systems that are antisocial, anti-family, etc. And we need to take a long, hard look at these things, and understand, how did this come to pass? Where are we? When are we? What is actually going on? So I'm going on a little bit here, but it's just to give an illustration of what I'm trying to convey. This different understanding. It's the same thing with a slightly different perspective, maybe a slightly deeper perception, so slightly more profound.
I think if you see it that way, it becomes, it's different. It's a very different story, even though you might perceive it slightly different to what is read, and you're kind of reading more into the understanding. It changes everything. It might be a small thing, but it becomes relevant. But completely changes. It's not even like a little bit change. It's like a huge change. And I think this is this is sad. This is actually sad because when I was growing up, I was Anglican. I was born Anglican. I attended Mass when I was a little bit younger. I was in boarding school. I attended Roman Catholicism for a while. And the stuff just never sat right with me. It was always, there's something wrong, there's something missing. And eventually I kind of left all that behind. I found it very mundane. I found that the guys tell you something, they cannot explain half the stuff that when you're going to ask them a question, they don't know. They can't explain it. You go to
and they try to discourage you.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't know, and they discourage you from trying to find it.
Exactly.
And the explanations that they give just are not satisfying, especially for an intellectual person, an educated person.
Yeah, I'll go and ask them a question. They'll say, "Oh no, but you can't question God." I'm thinking, but what kind of? How do you respond like that? If you've got an open mind and you want to
give us a brain
that
is capable of so much, but we mustn't question. Jesus Christ certainly questioned, and he encouraged questions. You could see in his parables, his beliefs were not particularly popular because he was very critical of a degraded form of the religion that was being practiced at that time. So he was and he actually came into conflict with the Pharisees very often. When they saw him picking food on the Sabbath, they would attack him and say, "Oh, you're working on the Sabbath. That goes against the law of Moses." And as a more profound reply, he'd say, "Hang on a second. So God created the Sabbath for men, not men for the Sabbath." Profound. Think about the story when the woman's caught in the act of adultery. And notice in the story, it's the woman that's caught and brought before Jesus and the judges, not the man. We don't know who the man was. I suppose there was a man. They bring the woman to you. There's a difference between
today, I don't know.
Yeah. So is the difference between what is set in the law and what is wise. So the law says that such a woman taken should be stoned to death. I don't know if you people have ever seen a stoning to death. I believe they still do it in certain places in the Middle East. And it's quite a horrific thing. They bury the person up to their waist in the sand, and then they throw rocks at the person and crack their skull until they die. Horrific. This is what they wanted. And they tried to trap Jesus with this. So they said to him, but you say that you come from the Father. This is what the law says. And he actually writes on the sand, in the sand on the floor. And we don't know what it was he writes. Some people speculate that he was actually writing the part of the law that actually says that an adulteress must be stoned to death. And then he turns the question on them, which is extremely wise and shows profound understanding. And he says, let he who is without sin throw the first stone. Okay, so you can stone her. The law says you must. So the only one that can do that, though, is those amongst you, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, that have no sin. If you are without sin, you cast the first stone. So she has sinned. We no doubt about that. We also understand the law. But you are coming and you are prosecuting her. Are you without sin so that you can throw the stone? And of course they can't. So they walk away and he's left alone with her. And he asks her and he says, where are your persecutors? She says, no, there's no one here to persecute me. He doesn't tell her that that's fine. He tells her to go and sin no more. He acknowledges that she was in sin. But think about the wisdom of it. Would it be the correct thing to destroy her life because she had made a mistake and committed a sin? We all commit sins all the time, don't we? He was wise. She got a fright. She learned her lesson, hopefully. And so the wise and correct thing was to give her a chance at repentance. So the law came by Moses, but the truth comes by Jesus Christ. And there's a subtle difference between them. The one doesn't outdo the other. It's a matter of interpretation. And so we see, in fact, here is the difference. Now, most of Judaism today descends from the Pharisees, who later went on to write the Babylonian Talmud and the Talmud in Jerusalem, and that is basically interpretation, rabbinical and oral law of the Torah and the Tanakh. So we understand where that comes from, but Jesus wasn't always in line with what they were teaching, and so it's important to actually see what he says. Go back and read it again with this different perspective, and you might see very different things.
I think we'd be in a very different path now if we were taught this from the beginning. If the churches that we attended and they kind of looked at these things the way you've described it, this world would be different. To be very different.
Well, I would be surprised. We get persecuted. I mean, I am a Catholic and I'm a Christian. This is my understanding. I'm reading the same book that other people are reading, and I'm getting a different understanding. But we would have been persecuted. Up until recently, I don't consider myself heretical. They might consider me heretical, but I certainly don't believe that. This is my understanding of what I'm perceiving, and what helps you also to get this broader understanding is the study of comparative religion. If you study comparative religion, you start understanding things. That doesn't mean I've become a Buddhist. It doesn't mean I've become a Hindu or anything else. I have a better understanding of things. That is all. Before you, I'm a Christian. Here's my clerical collar. I'm a priest ordained according to apostolic succession. But what I'm telling you is slightly different perspective. And I think that in many ways, and I don't want to point fingers at the church. We know from history that the church has made a lot of mistakes. All religions do that now. We had our fanatical side with the Crusades, with the Albigensian Crusade. We wiped out the last Gnostic sects in southern France, the Cathars, and other things. We burnt women as witches who probably were not witches at all. We've had the Malleus Maleficorum, the witch's hammer. We've made a lot of mistakes. I mean, we've had the Borgias as popes. So the Roman Catholic Church and no church, the Anglican Church was founded by King Henry VIII because he couldn't divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon. So, I mean, what reason is that to found a completely different church? So the church has made its mistakes, and we have to acknowledge that we've made mistakes and that we've gotten things wrong. And we need to be humble, and we need to be repentant, and we need to look at stuff maybe again and look at it again and say, is this really what Christ taught? Are we truly following Christ, or are we following something that was made up by men who were simply not initiates of his mysteries? And it's a possibility.
Well,
and I'm open to criticism.
I don't think it's a possibility. I don't think it's a possibility. I think it's a certainty, because when you make a mistake like that, and if you take Jesus as a standard, even if you don't look at the way you were looking at him, and just take Jesus as the most humble person, giving the advice, helping the people, to where it landed up with the Catholic Church, and I'm sorry to say this, but the Catholic Church, where everything became intolerable. They will not tolerate anything. They gathered the riches as much as they can. They would wipe you out if you didn't believe in anything to their ideas. That had nothing to do with Jesus, because that's not even what he taught. So it's not even on par with, even if it was just a literal meaning. It's not even on par with that. It's completely the opposite side of the scale. You know what I'm saying? So
unfortunately, that's what happens. That's entropy. That's what happens to teachings in this world. And I think it's happened in other religions as well. I think that it's happened to some extent, even in Buddhism, such an enlightened. I think that the Buddha's ashes weren't cold yet on his pyre, and they had started introducing things. If you look at certain things that are practiced in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, I don't think that Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, would approve of that at all. That is shamanism. That's got nothing to do with Buddhism. I think this happens in all religions. It's happened recently in Islam and other religions where there's fanaticism. Remember what fanaticism is. You have devotion, which is the good side. But the bad side of devotion is fanaticism. And we've done that. We've massacred people. We've killed people in the name of Christ, which things he would never have done. And we need to acknowledge that and know that. And by studying, we do that. And I think that that's also pointed to in the Jesus narrative, that knowledge is very important. It's not just faith. You must have knowledge, gnosis, a special kind of knowledge. Also faith, because without knowledge, you can't have wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom comes from on high and gives you understanding of what you know. So you have to have knowledge. The church persecuted Galileo for describing a solar-centric solar system. Okay, that Copernicus had spoken of 100 years before. What was the reason in doing so? It was because the knowledge didn't come from the church. It was control. So when you have secular power, as the church did, remember the papal states, the church actually was a king, he was a high priest, the Pope, and he was a high prophet. He spoke ex cathedra. So when you have that, when resources and finances come into things, they're very corruptible. They corrupt. And I think that attracted the wrong kind of people into those positions. But we must also be very careful. We can sit and criticize the Roman Catholic Church, the Orthodox, all that. But remember, they also did many good things. The first hospitals came from the church. They still did good things. They might have been misdirected or might have misunderstood, but they were still doing good things. What goes on in the Vatican is not what goes on in your local parish. Your local parish priest, Father Murphy or whoever, is still genuinely a very good man who cares about his people. The message of the gospel in its simplest form was still being conveyed. And we wouldn't have that now if it hadn't been carried down through all those centuries and people hadn't been martyred. So we need to have a balance. Yes, the church has done some very bad things. They've done very good things too. They've educated people. They've created hospitals. And so it goes in both cases. And we as sinners have also done wrong things. I know that I have. I often say to my congregation, there's not one of you sitting here that doesn't have skeletons in the closet. We all have. We've all done things that if it was exposed to everyone else would really humiliate us. Not so. So we have to be honest with ourselves. This is what we are. We're in ignorance. We are men wandering around in darkness looking for the light. And so that's humbling. Jesus was humble, but he wasn't weak. He was meek, but he wasn't weak. He was a very strong man. He was just absolutely aware. And he was aware because I believe that he was a manifestation of the word. So the beginning of the Bible, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was without form, and the Spirit of God hovered upon the face of the waters, that's one story. I prefer the one in John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We now know that everything is vibration, and everything is actually created by the Word. So the Greek word logos, word, is a way to describe Christ. He is the logos. He brings reason and order out of chaos. So I think if we can stick to that and stick to the original teachings and then add that to knowledge, profound knowledge of studying the world, studying the reality that we're in, all the different religions. What do they say? You might not agree with them, but what do they say? And then you come back and you say, now I think I understand a little bit better what this man was speaking about. This divine man that walked the earth had a message, and it was a valid message even today. That valid message has been destroyed by ignorance, by foolishness, by silly tradition, etc. Not that all tradition is bad. Think about manners. Why do we have manners? Manners comes from thousands of years of best practice interacting with each other. So teach your children manners. Order. You must have order. You can't have chaos. You must have law and order. So look at both sides of the coin. The Roman Empire is described in the Bible as a very evil empire and all that kind of. But think of all the good things that Rome did. They brought habeas corpus. They brought law and order. We still use their law. We still use their roads. Watling Street in England is a Roman road that is still used to this very day. So
democracy.
The good comes with the bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually so blessed that I didn't come from a very strict religious background, and I wasn't like, I meet so many people that are like my age, and like you included, Lee, that come out because they come out from a religious background and they're very jaded and they're like upset. And our friend Tristan Cap that we interviewed, and like I'm coming to religion now and I'm excited. I want to learn about it. I'm so excited about it because I haven't been jaded or like tarnished or whatever by an upbringing of a strict religious. I mean, I think I went to church probably 5 times in my life growing up with my parents because they didn't give a crap about it. So I didn't have any like perspective about it or any kind of real thoughts on it. And only now I'm coming to it, and it's so exciting for me to get involved in it and learn about it, and I'm loving it, And I just wish like that, that everyone else could have had that same kind of experience, coming to it on their own terms, because they don't have to be jaded.
I also didn't grow up in a religious family. My father was an atheist, and my grandfather before him was an atheist. And although they were of Italian descent and so were supposed to be Catholics, they were not practicing religion at all. I went to a Baptist Sunday school, which was a very good Sunday school, Troyville Baptist. Gave me an excellent formation. But then I went east. I started searching in the east. I studied Hinduism in my youth and Buddhism. I was always very spiritually orientated. And I was brought back to Christianity. And when I started perceiving, hang on a second, there's more to this than meets the eye. This isn't the Christianity that's being presented to you by these fundraising prosperity cult pastors and falling to pieces old churches with uneducated people in them. All of a sudden you start learning and you start understanding, but knowledge is always very important. You must have knowledge in order to have wisdom, and wisdom gives you the understanding, and wisdom is a gift from on high. So if you present yourself as a worthy candidate by searching determinedly, by being committed, by showing commitment, by self-sacrifice, then the higher ones, the communion of saints, the angelic realms, the higher beings will guide you. They will show you. But you have to commit. You have to show a commitment. No one reveals all their secrets just on the first day. You have to be committed. And that's something that the old initiation schools also used to do. You have to be committed. So this is just one interpretation. Just a warning that as critical as what we are to the church and all the different churches, that just always also think of all the good that they've done. It's not just all bad. It's very good. The Roman Catholic Church comes into a lot of criticism, especially recently with child abuse, and we know all of that kind of thing. That happens in all religions, by the way. That happens in all churches, by the way. It's just well hidden and hushed up. That has always happened.
It even happens not in a church. It also not even in a church. It happens. It happens everywhere.
Precisely. So those things are valid criticisms, though, but just take it in a measured way. look at the good that the church has done, the hospitals, the schools, the upliftment of communities. Yes, they've taken their pound of flesh, but they've also given. So we always need to have a balanced perspective where we can.
No, that's awesome, man. Jeez,
Great, man. Jeez, what a great interview.
Yeah, thank you, man. That was really eye-opening.
Well, I hope that I've explained it as well as what I can. Once again, just a reminder, I'm giving my own opinions here. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Liberal Catholic Church. I'm speaking on behalf of Damon, Father Damon. But I think that this just states a little bit to what, just changing your perspective just slightly can make you see completely different things, have a completely different message. And I think it's worthwhile studying those Gnostic texts, because even if you don't end up agreeing, it's always, you never lose out if you're learning something new. So if you attend a lecture and you don't agree with the outcomes of the guy or the solutions or the conclusions that a person draws, you've always learned something, because they're always digging up things along the side that you will have picked up. So that is never wasted. Experiencing that is never wasted. And also the best way to learn is to teach. So if you're teaching, if you're carrying the message forward, if you're seeking, sharing that, you will learn even more. So all of these things, like we were talking about, William, with the mystery schools and that, they are still all there. They're just hidden. They're not as blatant as maybe they once were. So this is there for those that are seeking in earnest and that show commitment. The truth will come. These things will be revealed, but you must show commitment to it.
And so, Damon, how do people? Do you guys have a website? Are people able to get hold of you somehow if they're more interested in that kind of?
Yes, we have a Facebook page. Now, I'm personally not on Facebook, but we have on Facebook. We have St. Albans Liberal Catholic Church. Okay. You can go into that on Facebook. We have websites international. You can Google us, the Liberal Catholic Church. Very Catholic, apostolic succession intact with the sacraments, slightly different perspective, and tolerant of different ideas. Okay, so in my church, for example, I won't call out people for what the church would call sinful behavior. I would remind people that there are consequences to all actions. And yes, you can do whatever you want, but remember, there are consequences. If you interfere with certain energies and powers and forces in nature, there's a backlash. Be careful. I'm not judging anyone. I'm not criticizing anyone, but the divine will, this is part of a plan. If you go against it and if you do all kinds of, there will be a backlash. So that is the whole idea. Rather learn about it. Learn about your reality. Try to understand it and be compassionate and be as little, not really judgment. You always use judgment, discernment, but don't prosecute people and judge people, vociferously and etc. Be easy. Go easy with people. Learn. Knowledge is very important.
It's actually funny. Our last interview was with Whitley Strieber, and he said something very profound. He said, sin. Hilly, what did he say? He said, sin is where you don't let yourself thrive and let other people thrive in life. Yeah, and that's what sin is. And that's kind of like what you're saying there.
Then you're digging yourself into a hole. And then while you're in the hole, continuing to dig without the realization that what you're doing, the direction that you're going in, is doing you damage in your long term. And it's probably going to cause you suffering in this life and in lives to come. There's always a reckoning, and Christ points to this in the Bible. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword. He who guides into bondage, leads into bondage, will himself be led into bondage. There's cause and effect in operation. So don't run amok. Learn things before you do that. But at the same time, you can't interfere with people's free choice. And the Lord himself does not interfere with people's free choice. When the prodigal son decides he wants his share and wants to leave, the Lord doesn't stop him. He gets given his share and he gets set free. But when he finally sees his son coming back on the horizon, he rushes out to meet him. That is real love. That is love, whether you are worthy or not. Just understand reality a little bit better, maybe. And to always, the final thing we must always say is, how little we know, we must be humble. We are stuck in a reality that we only slightly understand. We don't perceive it all. I mean, think of the electromagnetic spectrum. We can see light only on a very limited part of that spectrum. We can't see microwaves. We can't see gamma rays. We can't see X-rays, but we know they exist because of study, because of knowledge. Think about how much we don't perceive, how much we don't know. That is important.
Beautiful, Father Damon. Amazing. As always, such a pleasure to speak with you. And we will definitely have you on again. There's so many other topics I want to talk about, but if we'll spend another 6 hours here, so we'll do it on another time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for having me and for inviting me. I'm honored to be a part of your cast.
Well, thank you very much, Father Damon. It's
been
really
wonderful.
good to talk to you. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for your
Excellent.
time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dad.
Cheers.
Catch you
Bye.
soon, man.
Bye.
Cheers, bye.
Wow.
Wow.
Knowledgeable,
great,
man. Knowledgeable. Okay.
It's so funny. I love how he goes devolution. Did he say devolution or was he saying de-evolution?
De-evolution.
Like I didn't understand. He was just having like fun and like saying like it's devolution.
Well,
Devolution.
it could be, because remember what he was saying, it could be either or. Literally figurative. So it could be de-evolution or devolution. So whichever one you want it. You're heading towards the devil or you're heading down.
And also the other thing that I was like thinking, like, you know, when they the Council of Nicaea was putting all these like the Gospels together, all the books together, and they left some of them out. I was thinking like, because I mean I haven't read any of them. I always thought like, oh, they probably left it out because there was something that makes us powerful as humans, like reading this, and like they didn't want the masses to be powerful or whatever. But then he says he's read most of them and he only finds the one interesting. So I'm thinking, well, maybe they just left them out because they weren't interesting.
No,
they just they're just not necessary. A lot of
the stuff,
my fantasy got for the anticlimax for that.
A lot of the books kind of, if you read it like the Book of Enoch, they left it out. It's a massive book, but they left it out because to them it was completely different teaching to what they were subscribing to. So they left everything completely out. So yeah, but interesting, man. It's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I really love talking to him all the time. It's always such a pleasure.
Yeah,
can't wait to have him on again.
Yeah, no, fantastic, man.
Yeah, but
yeah, anyway, man, that's it for tonight, guys and girls from around the world. Thank you again for listening to Strange and Mysterious World. This is William and Lee. Please hit that subscribe button. I'm starting to get onto the Williams thing. Smash
like
that
and subscribe. Leave a comment.
Go onto YouTube.
That's the least you can do. We're not asking for any money. That's the only way to get this around. So just please, it'll just like one more click of the finger there. You know, it doesn't even take that much energy.
Yeah. Go onto YouTube,
if you like
subscribe
it, obviously.
there
If you
as
don't
well.
like it, then don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're also on YouTube now.
Yeah. Subscribers are growing quite nice on YouTube. So yeah, guys, join us there. And yeah, then at least you can view us. And then we would like to do some live podcasts coming up sometime soon as well.
We try to do one with Halloween. You can see all the
no, I'm going to delete it.
Lee's 1 minute and 40-second debut solo album. His solo album, 1 minute 40 seconds, trying to figure out how the fuck the live thing worked. That we couldn't work it out, so we just bailed and just did it and pumped it out.
No, but we'll do it sometime. We'll get it right. And we'll do it sometime. But yeah, guys, thanks again, and we'll
thanks.
Chat soon.
Peace out.
Cheers.